This is how to reduce as much tension in the body as possible with using one specific technique. Hi, I'm Effer, founder of Resilient Training and Rehab, and I've helped thousands of coaches and practitioners get faster and more consistent results with their clients. Let's get into it. In my experience, when people are trying to improve range of motion or reduce tension, a lot of times you'll see people stretching, foam rolling, and the problem is with that is that there's only a limited period of time in which those results actually stick. We start to open up a range of motion just for a window of time, and then it starts to go away. Whereas if we implement a different type of approach, we can start to hold on to these changes for a longer period of time. And therefore, when we start to incorporate this into our program, it can translate into our actual strength training so that we can not only improve range of motion, but also build on top of it. So this is more of a dynamic way in order to improve range of motion so that we can get deeper into our movements, but also get more effective training session. So we're talking about different types of rolling techniques. In my experience, rolling has been one of the most effective ways in order to improve overall mobility and reduce tension throughout the entire body all at once. It's a dynamic way to get from head to toe reduction in that tension while also reinforcing different types of movement patterns. So we're talking about 4 different rolling techniques that I tend to program quite often in my clients' programming in order to improve mobility throughout the body. One of my favorite rolling exercises is what I like to call the rock and roller. And essentially what this is going to do is this is going to start to reduce tension in the back, at the base of the pelvis, and even at the base of the neck. So the way that I want you to think about it is that if we have any type of flat surfaces on our back, so as I'm rolling back, if there's an area that I get stuck, that flat surface is going to be where we're going to hold a lot of tension, where that compression usually takes place, and where there's limited motion. So the analogy that I usually give with my clients is if you think of a golf swing, and if you hit the ground, you're going to create this divot in the ground. So you're going to create this hole in the ground. That hole is going to represent that tension. What we want to do is we want to fill the hole back up with the grass. That filling up and that flexion is going to be restoring the range of motion. So if I can improve that flexion in that area where I have a little bit more extension, where my back is arching, if I can start to close off the front, open up the back, that's how I can start to improve range of motion, especially when it comes to my rib cage. It's the easiest to see there because if there's areas where I'm extending and I can't flex, so I don't mean slouching, but I just mean I'm able to bring my rib cage in between my shoulder blades. Those areas there, I can start to restore that shoulder flexion. Expanding different areas of the rib cage reflect improving certain ranges of motion at the shoulder. So for example, if I'm opening up that lower part of the rib cage, that's going to reflect me opening up that early range of shoulder flexion. And if I want to expand the base of my neck, so if the base of my neck is more extended, then I'm not going to be able to get into those deeper ranges of shoulder flexion. And so what this rocket roller does is it expands the entire back so I can get that full range of motion of the shoulder, the full expansion of that rib cage. And the same thing is going to apply at the pelvis. Because I'm going to be rolling back onto my head, I'm going to create this inversion effect. So think if you take like a glass of water and you got the water at the bottom of the glass and you dump it upside down, well, all the water is going to go towards the cap or towards the head. And so if I am missing shoulder flexion at the base of my neck, for example, or that end range shoulder flexion, but I have the expansion down here, so maybe I can only get to 120 degrees, well then flipping upside down can actually be beneficial because I can take all that air and all the water, put it towards my head, and that's where I can start to expand. And so as I roll back in the rock and roller, I'm going to shift all the weight and all the expansion towards my head at one end of the exercise. Then as I roll back, it's going to shift towards the other. And so I'm going to get that full range and I'm going to create that roundness in the back, fill the divot so that I can expand the entire rib cage. So what you're going to do is you're going to do about 2 sets of about 8 breaths. You're going to breathe in as you roll back, breathe out as you come back up. And the more familiar you get with the exercise, the tighter you can hug your knees. And so what I want you to start with is just hugging your wrist. Then I want you to progress to hugging your elbows. If even going to your wrist is difficult, you can hug underneath your legs. that's going to be a little bit more easier, and then you can progress that way. So for the next exercise, we're going to focus on the lower body, and this is what I like to call the lower body roll. And really what it's doing is it's going to open up your hips. It's going to focus on opening up your hips first. It is going to translate into opening up your upper body. As you can see, I'm going to initiate the movement with my lower body. My upper body gets left behind, and then it gets pulled over at the end. But really, this is going to be emphasizing improving hip flexion, opening up the back of the hip. So therefore, it's going to improve some internal rotation on the bottom leg, hip flexion on the top leg, and some external rotation, but also get the pelvis rotating a little bit. And why I like to use this pretty early on, especially with people who are quite stiff, is that because it's such a slow movement and a relaxed movement, you're not using a lot of muscular tension in order to create that motion. And if you actually look at it at the end range, when I cross my leg over at the very bottom, it actually looks like a gait cycle. It actually looks like my right heel in this case is going to be striking the ground into heel strike, and my left foot's going to be a little bit more toe off. And that is going to represent me turning towards the right leg in this case, because I'm going to be opening up the back of the right, I'm going to be closing off the back of the left, but I'm going to be opening up the front of the left side. And so this lower body rotation or initiating with the lower body is going to really enhance that lower body mobility. And this is why I like to include it early on into my programming. So in order to perform this correctly, what I want you to think about doing is laying on your back with your arms out to your side. Palms up is going to be a little bit better because that's just going to drive a little bit more rotation through that upper body. You're going to breathe in as you lift your leg up and pretend like someone's pulling your leg across your body. That traction is going to further open up the hip and make sure that you're not using momentum to roll over, but you're using the actual segmental rotation of the spine as you're peeling off the ground. Once you go as far as you can, then you're going to let your upper body come with you. Again, it's going to be nice and relaxed. I don't want you to think about forcing it, but nice and relaxed as you think about pulling that top leg across the ground. Again, it's still reaching, and you're going to go as far as you can until your shoulders and your hips are stacked. Once you get into that position, you're going to take another big breath in. As you breathe out, you're going to return to the starting position. Think about now sliding that top leg back. So it's going to be initiated with the top leg. It's not going to be the upper body rolling back. It's going to be that slow dragging of the lower body until you can't do it anymore, then the upper body comes with you. So you're going to breathe in as you pull the leg across. As the upper body comes over, you're going to breathe out. Breathe in at the bottom position. Breathe out as you return to the starting position. And do about 2 sets of 6 to 8 reps. That should be enough to really get the benefit of this movement. For this next exercise, I really like using this upper body shifts in order to improve the tension between the shoulder blades and start to drive a little bit more shoulder and even neck mobility. Because what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna do these little micro shifts, turning the rib cage. In a previous post, I talked a lot about the mechanics of thoracic rotation, and this is something that is going to really emphasize that type of shift in terms of what's happening inside, but also on the outside. As I'm reaching my right arm forward, I'm gonna turn my rib cage towards that left arm, which is the bottom side in this case. As I shift back, I'm gonna turn my rib cage back towards the right. So if I can get this alternating rotation of my rib cage, I'm gonna be able to open up the front of my shoulder on one side, open up the back of my shoulder on the other side, and drive a little bit of that neck mobility as well. And so when I'm performing this movement, I'm gonna think about exhaling as I move, inhaling as I'm holding that end position. By holding the end position and really breathing in, I'm gonna maximize how much I can reduce tension in that area, how much I can expand that area so that I can really drive that rotation of the rib cage and reduce tension in the specific areas depending how I'm rotating. So I'm gonna exhale as I reach forward, inhale, hold, exhale as I reach back, inhale, hold, and I'm gonna do it super slow motion. I want you to think about 4 seconds reaching, 4 seconds pulling back, because I don't want you to use too much tension. I also don't want you to row the movement. I want you to think like you're turning the rib cage as though this left arm is almost reaching forward as you're going versus you pulling the rib cage, because then you're just going to squeeze your shoulder blade back, and that's just going to increase tension in the backside of your rib cage. So if you can do this as slow as possible, as relaxed as possible, and emphasizing the breath, that's how you're going to maximize this exercise. Before I cover the last exercise, if you like this approach in order to improve overall mobility while also doing it in a more dynamic and long-lasting way, then check out our full body program. We cover exercises just like this in the warm-up, but also progressing it through a strength training and progressive phase-like approach. So the last exercise is something I like to call the foam roller walkover, and what this is really going to do is really going to force the hip to be able to internally rotate. So a lot of times when people are stiff, I often see that their pelvis is squeezed at the back. They have a lot of tension going to the back side of their pelvis. They even have tension going to the front side. And so by laying on top of the foam roller, that's going to create this shape of the pelvis that opens up the back of the hip while also opening up the front, depending on how we're going to roll. Because if this right leg is fixed on the foam roller, for example, as the left leg comes over, you can see how the back part of the pelvis will open. As it comes back, it'll still open at the front side. So if I go forward with the left, the back side opens. As I come back with the left, the front side opens on the right. And so I'm getting that overall mobility. But the great thing about a movement like this is that it's such a good transfer over into your strength program. And so how I'm going to think about doing this is, in this case, I've laid on my right side. So you're going to have your right knee, the outside of the knee, staying in contact with the ground at all times. You're going to take the foam roller and you're going to put it around your belt line. As you roll over, you're going to bring your left knee and your left arm over, and without overly rotating. And the way that you feel if you're overly rotating is that right foot starts to come off. I want you to keep the shin on the entire time. So you're going to breathe in as you roll over, breathe out as you come back with your left leg and your left arm. You do about 2 sets of about 6 reps before you progress on to your next exercise. By having this type of approach where we're really starting to focus on not only just the joint position, but reducing tension through rolling, which is just going to shift where we get the pressure within our body, how we can relax our muscles at different phases of the motion, but also its influence on gravity, where when I'm on my back, I'm the most relaxed. I transition onto my side, where I'm a little bit less relaxed because there's more gravity acting on me, and I can roll back and forth between those so that I'm not just doing some type of stretching exercise and then hoping that it sticks when I stand up and move around. But this integrated approach allows us to have a better transferability into our program and therefore have long-lasting results. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.